Arguably the most well-known scene in all of German literature is the one of Faust sitting in his study and realizing that he doesn't know anything, despite of all the things that he has learned and studied. So I'm so excited that today we're going to get into the scene Night, that is where Faust begins for most people, and I'm gonna be working as always from the David Luke translation that is available in Oxford World Classics, and I also have my trusty German copy here, and I'm gonna read you some passages in German as well. Let's quickly recap. We talked about the 3 entrances to the text, the 2 that don't belong to the text in terms of content, and then the 3rd one, the prologue in heaven, where the Lord, God, and Mephistopheles, the devil, make a deal to, basically to deceive Faust. Mephistopheles wants to deceive Faust and get his soul, and the Lord says, nah, you're not going to be able to do that. So this is what the play is about, but we're not gonna immediately get to that part of Mephistopheles trying to convince Faust. We're first gonna see Faust alone in his study. And by the way, if you're interested in a more in-depth analysis of the first 3 entries to the text, I'm gonna link the Faust playlist up here. I'm gonna put all of the videos having to do with Faust together there, so if you prefer watching it chronologically, you're very welcome to do so. Even though I don't think it's completely necessary with this text, I think you can get into it at any page, basically. So, the first part of the tragedy. If we go to page 15 in my edition, we see the scene Night. And it says, a high vaulted, narrow, gothic room. And I just want to take a moment to reflect on that room that Faust is in, because I think it perfectly mirrors his state of being. I'm gonna put a picture on the screen of what I think this room could look like. And we know that Faust is searching for ultimate meaning, knowledge, enlightenment, if you want. So he wants to go up. Think of that metaphor of the long-legged grasshopper that we saw in the previous video, that picture that Mephistopheles is painting for us. He wants to go up, but he's also in a narrow room, right? So he feels like he's in a cage. He's gonna call his room a cage later himself, actually. And the Gothic, the going up, represents his strive for enlightenment, essentially. And I think it's just very beautiful how the description of the room perfectly mirrors his state of being here. So he sits in this cage and he realizes slowly that our human knowledge is limited. Yeah, and we're gonna meet him now in the middle of that realization. And let's read probably the most known scene in Faust together. It's, by the way, one of the few monologues of Faust in this play. Faust, sitting restlessly at his desk. Well, that's philosophy I've read, and law and medicine I fear. Theology too, from A to Z. Hard studies all that have cost me dear. And so I sit, poor silly man, no wiser than when I began. They called me professor and doctor, forsooth, for misleading many an innocent youth. These last 10 years now, I suppose, pulling them to and fro by the nose. And I see that all our search for knowledge is vain, and this burns my heart with bitter pain. I've more sense, to be sure, than the learned fools, the masters and pastors, the scribes from schools. No scruples to plague me, no irksome doubt, no hellfire or devil to worry about. Yet I take no pleasure in anything now, for I know nothing. I wonder how I can still keep up the pretense of teaching, or bettering mankind with my empty preaching? Can I even boast any worldly success? What fame or riches do I possess? No dog would put up with such an existence, and so I'm seeking magic's assistance, calling on spirits and their might to show me many a secret sight, to relieve me of the wretched task of telling things I ought rather not ask, to grant me a vision of nature's forces that bind the world and all its seats and sources. So in Faust we have the pinnacle of the seeker. He tells us that he has studied everything, he has named those 4 faculties: law and medicine, theology and philosophy. That would have been the only 4 faculties you could study back in the day when this play was written. So that means he has tried it all, and he's realizing the limitations of that strive. And I just want to give you a little assignment if you want to read that monologue out loud yourself sometime. I like to do that. I've done it for years. Sometimes when I sit here in my study and I feel like the room is almost fuming because I've, tried to read all day or learn things, and sometimes I just get very frustrated at the circularity of language or at the fact that I never seem to be any closer to anything at the end of the day. And then I just I say this monologue out loud, like I walk back and forth in my study, and it's such a mood to get into. And I think if you're drawn to Faust for any reason, you do feel the same frustration that he does. So you probably have those moments, and next time you do, I implore you to give it a go and see how you feel actually speaking those words out loud yourself. So he says he wants to stop peddling in words, right? So, and innermost life, all this I shall see, and stop peddling in words that mean nothing to me. So no more studying for him, no more reading. He wants to become a part of life. And he realizes that looking through the sense of rationality, he's never gonna get there. And he pleads, "Oh, take me to the hilltops there, to wander in the sweet moonlit air." Yeah, so here we have again this picture of height, of ascending, of going up, right? Think back on the long-legged grasshopper. But inevitably he fails and he lands down in the grass again. And he says, "God, how these walls still cramp my soul, this cursed stifling prison hole, where even heaven's dear light must pass dimly through the panes of painted glass, hemmed in by books to left and right, which worms have gnawed, which dust layers choke, and round them all to ceiling height, this paper stained by candle smoke. These glasses, boxes, instruments, all stuffed and cluttered anyhow, ancestral junk, look at it now. Your world, this world your brain invents." I want to read you the same passage in German as well. "Weh, steck ich in dem Kerker noch, verfluchtes, dumpfes Mauerloch, wo selbst das liebe Himmelslicht trüb durch gemalte Scheiben bricht, beschränkt von diesem Bücherhauf, den Wurmenagen staubbedeckt, den bis ans hohe Gewölb hinauf ein angeraucht Papier umstreckt, mit Gläsern, Büchern rings umstellt, mit Instrumenten vollgepropft, Urväter Hausrat dreingestopft, das ist deine Welt, das heißt eine Welt." Strangely enough though, he comes back to seeking his answers in a book, as we will see a few lines down, even though a few moments before he said that he didn't want to do that anymore. And I just want to take a moment to reflect on that idea that insight doesn't actually change us. And it made me think of a very beautiful passage in Proust that I want to read to you, because he's just the master of putting these subtle human mechanisms into beautiful words. So it's page 149 of Swan's Way in my edition. And he says, "Facts do not find their way into the world in which our beliefs reside. They do not produce our beliefs. They do not destroy them. They may inflict on them the most constant refutation without weakening them, and an avalanche of afflictions or ailments succeeding one another without interruption in a family will not make it doubt the goodness of its God or the talent of its doctor." So again, he goes back to books, he's looking for a sign, and we see that on top of page 17, he throws open a book and sees the sign of the macrocosm. And I'll put that sign of the macrocosm on the screen for you to see it. And it basically shows us the universe as an ordered, complete whole entity, a living unity, if you want. And he feels a sudden ecstasy, you know. He feels like, oh, that was the sign that God sent him and that God made for him, because he feels really connected to this picture that he's seeing. And he even says, am I a god? Yeah. So, am I a god? Light fills my mind. In these pure lines and forms appear all nature's workings to my inner sense made clear. So, you know, that sentence is really what most defines Faust. Am I a god? You know, this striving to be like God. But it doesn't work. Yeah. So he does in this scene kind of have an open, enlightening moment, and he says he understands now. You know, I see what God is trying to show me. I know what the sign means. And he says, the spirit world is open wide. Only your heart has closed and died. Yeah, so he realizes that the spirit world or the truth is always there, and it's just a matter of us opening ourselves up to it. And that's what he's succeeding in that moment. So he has a really beautiful insight into the nature of reality a few lines down when he says, how it all lives and moves and weaves into a whole. Each part gives and receives. Angelic powers ascend and redescend, and each to each their golden vessels lend. Fragrant with blessing, as on wings, from heaven through the earth and through all things, their movement thrusts, and all in harmony it sings. And I am going to read it to you in German again, because that is one of, I think, the most beautifully written scenes. So he says, wie alles sich zum Ganzen webt, eins in dem anderen wirkt und lebt, wie Himmelskräfte auf und niedersteigen und sich die goldenen Eimer reichen, mit segenduftenden Schwingen vom Himmel durch die Erde dringen, harmonisch all das All durchklingen. But as always, there comes the downfall again. Yeah, how great a spectacle, but that I fear is all it is. Yeah, so what he's seeing is all just a momentary appearance and nothing of real substance. Anyways, it says he turns impatiently to another page of the book and sees the sign of the earth spirit. Yeah. So that sign of the earth spirit is an invention by Goethe. It doesn't actually exist. So we don't know what it would look like. But you know, it's a lot more, well, literally down to earth, I would say. So the earth spirit, that what is happening on our plane, and Faust immediately feels more connected to that, you know, that sign of the macrocosm with the heaven and whatnot, that might have been a bit too far away for him to grasp. But now the sign of the earth spirit, he says, yeah, how that affects him, right? How differently the sign affects me. You, spirit of earth, are closer to me. Fresh strength already pulses through me. I glow already from wine so new. So again, I think there's something, you know, very kind of childlike about Faust, because even though he's so bitter and restless on the one hand, he always immediately goes up on that roller coaster again and is so excited when he's learning something new. And he puts all of his hope into that new appearance, into that new way of acquiring knowledge. Yeah, so he's filled with that longing. He says, Spirit, I long to summon. Now I feel you hovering round me. Oh, reveal yourself. Ha, 'tis pain tears my heart. A new sensation stirs all my senses into perturbation. I am committed, you shall come. You must appear to me, though you may strike me into dust, right? So he's like, reveal yourself to me, spirit of the earth. Give me what I'm looking for, please. And if we read carefully, then he's already here playing with the idea of giving his life for a new kind of insight. Because he does say, appear to me, though you may strike me into dust. Yeah, so even if I die, it will have been worth it. So now the spirit actually comes, and Faust cannot even look at him. Yeah, he's disgusted, he's afraid, and he says, alas, this sight's unbearable. So you must imagine this spirit hovering in front of Faust and him just being terrified of what he has just done, maybe not being able to actually take in what the spirit is here to say him. And the spirit seems a little bit annoyed, like, you called upon me, why are you so afraid now? What is going on? You know, he says, now that my breath blows around you, in the depths of terror I have found you, shrinking and writhing like a worm. And Faust now kind of identifies with him, right? He says, it is I, Faust, you and I are the same. To which the spirit tells him what he really is and what the spirit of the earth actually is. And that is another extremely beautiful passage that just so perfectly sums up what the spirit of the earth and of our cyclical life would say. So the spirit speaks. In life like a flood, in deeds like a storm, I search to and fro, up and down I flow. Birth and the grave, an eternal wave, turning, returning, a life ever burning. At time's whirring loom I work and play, God's living garment I weave and display. Yeah, we have to read that in German too. That scene really gives me goosebumps. I think it's absolutely beautiful. So, der Geist. In Lebensfluten, im Tatensturm, wall ich auf und ab, webe hin und her. Geburt und Grab, ein ewiges Meer, ein wechselnd Weben, ein glühend Leben. So schaffe ich am sausenden Webstuhl der Zeit und wirke der Gottheit lebendiges Kleid. And Faust is in ecstasy. He says, yes, earth spirit, you know, how close you are to me. Again, identifying with him. But in reality, he only understands the abstract sciences, you know. He can't grasp what the spirit is actually trying to tell him. He just says, yeah, I'm you. And the spirit vanishes. And the last thing he says, you match the spirit you can comprehend. I am not he, right? So, who are you to think you can identify with me? You're only projecting onto me what you think I am and then identifying with it. And I think that is such an important idea if we think about God and the idea of God, that, you know, most people carry around with them, and they want that God to be something that they project onto it, essentially. But what it really is, we cannot comprehend if we keep just projecting. So I think that is a wonderfully subtle message that Goethe is maybe trying to give us here through the text. Yeah, and then we have Faust collapsing. Yeah, he's completely disheartening. He says, "Not you? Who is he then? I, made in God's image, and not even like you?" Yeah, so he's like, who am I similar to then? You know, if it's not you, please give me a sign. I mean, I am God. I'm made in God's image, and it's a little bit comical here because the answer we get in the text is when he said, "Who is he then? Who is the spirit I can comprehend?" The door knocks, and in comes Wagner. So Wagner entering in a nightgown with a nightcap, carrying a lamp, and Faust turns to him impatiently. Wagner is a student and an assistant of Faust, and in this scene he kind of like contrasts Faust, because he's pursuing studies and he loves science and learning things by heart, and Faust is kind of beyond that, as we have seen. But Wagner thinks he can still explain the world through science. So Wagner comes in and says, "Excuse me, sir, I heard your declamation. You were reading a Greek tragedy, no doubt? That art is one of powerful persuasion. These days, I'd like to learn what it's about." Yeah? So you see, he's reading Greek tragedy, he's obviously studying. Yeah, and Faust, as we said, he's long beyond that. And if you pursue that, you know, you might, in the best case, get some superficial acknowledgements, but it's not going to really get you anywhere, right? He says, "Children will gape and fools admire, if that's the audience to which you aspire. But what can blend all hearts into a whole? Only the language of the soul." So for a while they just kind of keep speaking back and forth to each other, and one doesn't really comprehend the other. Again, I'll read it to you in German because I think it's fantastic. "Bewunderung von Kindern und Affen, wenn euch danach der Gaumen steht, doch werdet ihr nie von Herz zu Herzen schaffen, wenn es euch nicht von Herzen geht." Yeah, so he basically says that, you know, if you just learn this and that and quote some people along the way, you'll get nowhere. And Wagner doesn't understand Faust and immediately answers with such a quote again. And he says, "Alas, our life is short and art is long, they say." Yeah, so "Vita brevis ars longa." He's quoting immediately again. And Faust drives the point home that you know, knowledge isn't going to get you anywhere, and if it doesn't come from inside of you, it's basically useless. So he says, "A manuscript, is that the sacred spring that stills one's thirst forevermore? Refreshment, it's your own soul that must pour it through you, if it's to be anything." And Wagner says, "Excuse me, but it's very pleasant studying epochs other than the present, entering their spirit, reading what they say, and seeing how much wiser we have grown today." So again, it goes back and forth like that a little bit, and you can see how Faust is still cranky, right? It's in the middle of the night, he's impatient, he doesn't really care about what Wagner says, and he wants to be alone again. So Wagner leaves and says something that is really characteristic to him in his last two lines. He says, and that's at the bottom of page 21, I've studied now for years with zeal and zest. Already I know much. I must know all the rest. Yeah, wanting to know everything. So we have Wagner, who wants to know everything, and Faust, who wants to know what keeps it all together, the higher truth. And I must say that I feel both of those sentiments in my heart at different times. Maybe you can relate to that as well. But sometimes I feel as though all the knowledge and history and philosophy we can learn is kind of in vain, and I don't want to waste my time with it, and I just want to know what's underneath it all. And then in other times in my life, I'm just so eager to learn it all, and I feel like it's really getting me anywhere. It's really getting me somewhere. So I think if you're a little bit in touch with those two sides also of yourself, then you'll understand their dialogue and their back and forth much better, because Wagner comes back later still, and they'll touch upon that conversation again. Yeah, so Faust is alone again, and immediately he goes back to his bleak, desperate seeking for answers. Yeah, he complains about Wagner a little bit and about that sentiment. He says, "Why does he not despair? A mind so void and blinkered, so benign and earthbound. Greedy for gold, he scratches in the ground, and when he finds some worms, he's overjoyed." Yeah. So basically, he's just looking for really, knowledge that doesn't mean much. It's like worms, like you're digging for gold and you're happy to find a worm because you've found something and you can say you've done something. But that's not really, you're not really asking the right questions or the highest questions. That's how I would interpret that. So Faust sits there and kind of reflects on what has happened before Wagner came in with the earth spirit, and what exactly actually happened there. And he says, "Was close to me, and madness he assailed." So he's talking about the earth spirit. "My mind, when like a dwarf I seemed to shrink before that grand vision, and I quailed. Dwindling to nothingness, you snatched me from the brink. I, God's own image, how close it shone, the mirror of eternal verity. I fed upon its light and clarity, within myself all mortal limits gone." Yeah, so he still feels a sort of melancholy to that state that he was in. He wants to conjure it up again. He's dwelling on what has happened, but he cannot reproduce it. So he goes on a little bit like that. You can read that yourself. I'll read you a passage in German as well that I really love. So it's line 623. "Nicht darf ich dir zu gleichen mich vermessen, hab ich die Kraft, dich anzuziehen besessen. So hatte ich dich zu halten keine Kraft. In jenem seligen Augenblicke, ich fühlte mich so klein, so groß, du stießest grausam mich zurücke ins ungewisse Menschenlos. Wer lehret mich, was soll ich meiden, soll ich gehorchen jenem Drang? Ach, unsere Taten selbst, so gut als unsere Leiden, sie hemmen unseres Lebens Gang." Puh. Man, Faust is really worth it to learn German, I would say. How beautiful. I feel extremely lucky that my mother tongue is German, because I know how difficult it can be for people to learn, and I have a lot of respect for people who do and who do their best with this language, because it's very complicated and it's not easy to pronounce, and the grammar is also, not the easiest thing. I have to say I can even sympathize with that a little bit, because I grew up speaking a very rural dialect of Austrian German, and in school we had to be able to speak proper High German, and to me that always felt a little unnatural. And I've been back at university now for a month, and I'm quite nervous about having to write papers in German, because it's not an easy language, even if it's your mother tongue. I mean, maybe other people feel differently about it, but I've spent so many years now speaking other languages that I feel like my German and all its grammar rules, it's just very confusing. Sometimes I write a sentence and I'm like, can you even say that? I'm not sure, so we'll see how it goes. But honestly, it's worth it. I'm so happy that I can read the great German novels and plays in the original, because from what I can see and tell, I think German is probably the most difficult language to translate to English from the ones I know. I only know 3 other languages, but and even though David Luke is doing such a great job at this, like, really, I respect that so much, it's not the same. But anyways, let's keep going. So now he really despairs, and Faust says, I'm not like a god. Too deeply now I feel this truth. I am a worm stuck in the dust, burrowing and feeding, where at last I must be crushed and buried by some rambler's heel. So he's depressed, frustrated, and there are suicidal tendencies. If we go to line 660, he reflects upon how, all these books are also not going to help him. Help me. Okay. So, line 660. How shall I find fulfillment in this goal, reading the 1,000 times reprinted tale of man's perpetual strife and stress and rare occasional happiness? So all this reading, not gonna get me anywhere. But then his eyes get drawn to something. Ich grüße dich, du einzige Fiole. He says, but what is this? My eyes, magnetically drawn, are fixed on that one spot where I can see that little flask. Why does sweet light break over me? And when in a dark wood the gentle moonbeams dawn. So what he sees is a little flask with poison in it, and he's taking it down, which basically means he's intending to take his own life. He says, quintessence of all deadly and refined, elixirs, come and serve your master as you can. And he feels a sort of peace coming over him with his plan to take his own life. He says, I see you, and am healed as with a balm. I seize you, and my striving soul grows calm. And he's really out there now. He's seeing how this is going to give him the ultimate answer, right? The last desperate try for ultimate meaning and enlightenment he hopes to find in death. And he says, line 720, old goblet of pure crystal, come now, let me take you from your shelf and seethe. Long years have passed since last I thought of you. I have a potion here whose work's soon done. Its drizzling liquid fills you, dark and brown. I made and mixed it well, as I know how, and so, with all my heart, I raise it now. With this last festive drink, I greet the rising sun. So he sets the cup to his lips, and through death he wants to, you know, calm his restless heart, as he says. And then there's bells ringing in the background, and that makes him pause. Yeah, so he already put the cup to his lips. Then he pauses because it's Easter morning, and actually he hears a chorus of angels singing. Yeah, so the chorus sings, "Christ is risen from the dead, hail to all mortal men, from sin's insidious bane, from their inherited bondage, set them free." And Faust, kind of taken aback a little bit, says, "What lilting tones are these? What notes profound? Cry to me, do not drink. Have they such power?" Yeah. So those notes kind of make him stop and stop his endeavor to take his own life. And do these bells with their dull blooming sound announce the Easter's festival's first hour? Yeah, and then there's more a chorus of women and the chorus of angels, some more singing. And then Faust says, "You gentle, puissant choir of heaven, why do you come seeking me? The dust is stronger, go chant elsewhere to tenderer souls, for I can hear the message, but believe no longer." Yeah, very non-sentence in German too. "Die Botschaft höre ich wohl, allein mir fehlt der Glaube." Yeah, so I hear what you're saying, but I don't believe, basically. But still it makes him stop. And for the rest of his monologue, he's reflecting how those bells remind him of his childhood. It reminds him of the days of his youth. And this memory is ultimately what saves him. Yeah, so he is saved for now. And you know, it's also spring, it's Easter, nature is coming back to life again. So we find the theme of resurrection everywhere. And he says, "And yet these strains, so long familiar, still they call me back to life. There was a time of quiet, solemn Sabbaths, when heaven's kisses would fill me with its love's descent." Yeah, so musing on his youth, basically. And the last lines that Faust says in this scene of night are, "Those hymns would herald youthful games we played. To celebrate the spring, as I recall, that childhood I am moved, my hand is stayed. I cannot take this last and gravest step of all. Oh, sing, dear heavenly voices, as before. Now my tears flow. I love the earth once more." Yeah. And then the chorus sings again. So he is saved for now. We're gonna meet him in the next scene that is called Outside the Town Wall. I'm gonna do that in another video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, I will be happy to read them. And otherwise, I'll hope to get the next part out soon. Yeah, and I hope this, you know, did something to bring you the text a bit closer and to understand it a bit better. I really do hope so. All right, thank you for watching, and bye bye.